Hello everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, daily newspaper analysis. Today is 10th. Today we have some very important topics from different newspapers. So one by one we'll be discussing all these topics in detailed manner. The first topic is about Indian Space Research Organization, its success and its challenges in future that ISRO is going to face. The second most important topic is the draft bill on regulation of pesticide use in agriculture. So in fact, the government has put this bill for the public feedback, and we'll be discussing about this bill and why the center has been coming up with this bill. And then we'll also understand Enforcement Directorate and recent West Bengal Chief Minister's protests against ED raids in different parts of West Bengal. And then we'll also understand the recent US withdrawal from the International Solar Alliance and its implications, consequences for the organization and for India as well, because India is a country along with France has launched this International Solar Alliance. So let's understand these topics in detail. The first topic is about the ISRO and its successes so far after its establishment, and the next big challenges that ISRO is going to face in the future. Now, if you talk about the ISRO, so ISRO is one of the most successful organizations in India and in the world also. So why? Because a country like India, which has invested a lot in science and technology, and ISRO has come out as the most successful organization in the history of India after its independence. Now, if you talk about the ISRO as an organization, so for the first time it was established around in 1962, right? So there was a formation of Indian National Committee for Space Research, so which is also known as INCOSPAR, to coordinate space activities in India. So that was the objective in 1962 for the first time. ISRO was not fully established, but this committee was established in 1962, and that has led to the foundation for establishing ISRO in the later periods of time, right? So therefore this INCOSPAR has been renamed as ISRO in the year 1969. So therefore we could say that ISRO as an organization to promote the space related activities was established in India in the year 1969, and earlier it was called as Indian National Committee for Space Research, INCOSPAR, right? So therefore after ISRO was established, the first attempt from the ISRO to launch a satellite, it was Aryabhatta. So Aryabhatta was the first satellite that was launched by ISRO, so with the help of a Soviet launch vehicle, right? So it was launched in the year 1975, right? So after that ISRO has actually launched a number of satellites, and even ISRO has tested PSLV, Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle, GSLV, and GSLV Mark III, and recently we have also seen Launch Vehicle Mark III, LVM. So in fact, if we talk about the PSLV is known as the workhorse of ISRO. So why it is known as workhorse of ISRO? Because of its huge success rate. So because of its huge success rate, and PSLV is also most reliable launch vehicle with ISRO, because with PSLV, ISRO has launched a number of satellites successfully into the orbit. So after PSLV, we have GSLV, right? So GSLV is not that successful, but it is also, we can consider that it is also to some extent successful. And GSLV is actually used to launch the communication satellites. Generally, the communication satellites are, heavyweight satellites. So therefore, GSLV is actually used to carry these communication satellites, which are heavyweight in nature. So generally, PSLV is not suitable to launch these communication satellites. To launch communication satellites, GSLV is being used. So recently, this launch vehicle Mark III, LVM3. So this LVM3 is used to launch the heavy satellites, right? So apart from that, ISRO is going to have the next generation launch vehicle as well, NGLV, very soon, right? So that its capacity could be further enhanced over a period of time, right? So you could pause the video and you could also go through the launches of ISRO particularly the flagship launches from the ISRO. And then let's understand a brief introduction about the ISRO and what are the successes so far and what challenges ISRO is going to face, and how ISRO could actually overcome these challenges. What should be the way forward? Let's understand these things in a nutshell, right? So first thing that we should talk about the ISRO. ISRO is the most successful and most reliable. It is most successful and most reliable space agency in the world. Now, in fact, ISRO has also demonstrated its capability number of times, because ISRO is generally known for its low cost launch of satellites into the space. So in the beginning, I've told you that Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle, PSLV. So this is the most successful launch vehicles of ISRO, and it is known for its success, its reliability. So it has been used to launch a number of satellites into Earth's orbit. Right? For example, Chandrayaan 3. Right? So Chandrayaan 3, it is also one of the successful programs that ISRO has launched in the year 2023, and the objective of Chandrayaan 3 is to soft land on the south pole of the moon. Soft land on south pole of the moon. So in fact, Chandrayaan 3 is successful. India successfully landed on the south pole of the moon, and India became the first country to successfully soft land on the southern pole of the moon. So therefore, it has actually further enhanced the capability of ISRO, the resilience of ISRO to launch such a sophisticated and a complex missions. In recent times, ISRO has also launched another mission called Aditya L1 mission. So Aditya L1 mission, it has also entered into the hollow orbit of Sun. Now, because entering into this hollow orbit around the Sun, it is not easy. So this is also known as the L1 point, Lagrange point 1. So this was achieved in the year 2024. So therefore, this Aditya L1 mission was India's first dedicated solar observatory as well. Right? So in future also, we have plans of launching Chandrayaan 4. The objective of Chandrayaan 4 is to bring back samples, particularly the lunar samples from moon to Earth. So it is not easy to bring the soil sample from moon to Earth, but Chandrayaan 4 is going to do that in future. And another sophisticated mission is going to be Gaganyaan mission. So we have discussed about this Gaganyaan mission number of times. So Gaganyaan mission actually means that sending Vyomanauts into the low Earth orbit. So they will spend around 3 days and safely bring them back into the Earth. So that is the Gaganyaan program. So around 3 to 2 astronauts, Vyomanauts, will be sent to the low Earth orbit. So if ISRO is successful, India will become the 4th country to send humans into the space. So first 3 countries are USSR, or now Russia, USA, China. So they already sent human beings. They already have the capability of sending humans into this space. However, if Gaganyaan is successful, it is going to be carried out next year or last phase of this year. If it is successful, then India will also become the 4th country to successfully send human beings into the space. Now, apart from all these launches, ISRO is also very well known for the international collaborations. When we talk about these international collaborations, particularly with other like-minded space agencies like NASA, because ISRO, in collaboration with NASA, has launched a satellite which is called as NISAR. So NISAR is a NASA ISRO synthetic aperture radar. Right? NISAR actually means NASA ISRO synthetic aperture radar, and it was launched in July 2025. So this was also one of the flagship launch by ISRO. So therefore, it has been indicating that a growing collaboration between ISRO and other like-minded space agencies around the world. right? So if you look at the milestones of ISRO, for example, in 2023 Chandrayaan 3 lands on the moon's south pole. In 2019 Chandrayaan 2 was launched. So even though we were not able to soft land on the southern pole of moon through Chandrayaan 2, but we have achieved that through Chandrayaan 3. And Chandrayaan 1 was also successful, where we have sent a satellite around the orbit of moon, right? So therefore in 2017 also we have successfully launched 104 satellites into the Earth's orbit. So these are all milestones of ISRO that so far we have actually achieved, right? There have been a rising expectations from ISRO, and it also creates certain challenges before ISRO. Now, why there are rising expectations? So just now we have discussed that ISRO became the first, or India became the first country to successfully soft land on the southern pole of the moon. If Gaganyaan is successful, then India will become the fourth country in the world to send human beings into the space. So because of all these ambitious programs, the success of ISRO and its launch vehicles, particularly PSLV, GSLV, and next generation launch vehicle LVM. So because of all these different launch vehicles and ISRO's reliability, its low cost launches, because of all these reasons there has been a rising expectation from the ISRO in the future, right? So in future ISRO is going to launch Gaganyaan as well, and ISRO is going to launch Chandrayaan 4 as well. The objective of Chandrayaan 4 is to bring back soil samples, lunar soil samples, to Earth. Now it is a very sophisticated and a very complex mission. It is not easy. So in order to achieve the success in Chandrayaan 4, recently ISRO has also successfully conducted the SpadeX mission. The SpadeX mission is actually space docking. So this space docking has also been successfully conducted by ISRO. So that will help India demonstrate its capability to bring back soil samples from the lunar surface to back to Earth. And apart from Chandrayaan 4, Gaganyaan, and ISRO's flagship next generation launch vehicle, this next generation launch vehicle is going to be the game changer, because it could launch the heaviest satellites if it is developed. The capability to launch satellites will also be further enhanced if it is actually developed. Now you could see here the next generation launch vehicle. Now next generation launch vehicle could be a cost-effective and a reusable solution before the ISRO, and the total budget that has been allocated to develop this next generation launch vehicle is 8,200 crore rupees. So we have ambitious targets. So ambitious targets in the sense that the government has been planning to establish a Bharatiya Antariksha Station. You might have heard about the International Space Station. And China itself has developed its own space station. China already have its own space station in the low Earth orbit, and there is International Space Station as well. So this International Space Station has been established, a collaborative initiative between countries like US, Canada, France. So all these countries have come together and they have established ISS. Now, like how China has established its own international or Chinese space station, India also wanted to establish the Bharatiya Antariksha Station, right? And apart from that, Indian crewed landing, which is Gaganyaan, Indian crewed landing on moon by 2040. So that actually means that through new generation launch vehicle it could be possible. We will have our own space station which is called as Bharatiya Antariksha Station very soon. And apart from that, we will also send human beings not just to space, but we will also send them to moon as well by 2040. So with this objective, the expectation is rising on ISRO, but the challenge is that funding is an issue. Regulatory issues is another problem. Right now, if we talk about NGLV specifically, the payload capacity of NGLV is 3x of the current largest payload capability launch vehicle, which is LVM-3, right? NGLV's total payload capacity, that means its capacity to carry satellites, would be 3x more than the current heaviest launch vehicle. So apart from that, NGLV will also facilitate low cost access to space, and a modular green propulsion systems will also be installed, right? So therefore this is the objective of the new generation launch vehicle, and ISRO very soon is going to develop the new generation launch vehicle, and it could be a game changer in this space arena as well, right? So as I have briefly told you about the Chandrayaan 4 mission. Now if we talk about this Chandrayaan 4 mission, so this Chandrayaan 4 is expected to be conducted in the last phase of this year. The objective of Chandrayaan 4 is to collect the soil sample from the surface of the moon and bring it back safely to the earth. Unlike Chandrayaan 3, so because Chandrayaan 3 is just focused on soft landing on the southern pole of the moon, but in Chandrayaan 4, what we will do, we will soft land on the surface of the moon, and we will also bring back the lunar soil samples from the moon, and we'll bring them back to the earth. So in this particular mission, this SpaceX is very important. Space docking is very important. So in order to ensure that we have a capability, this SpaceX mission has also already been conducted by ISRO, right? So expected launch of this Chandrayaan 4 is 2026 under the Gaganyaan mission timeline, right? Now in this context, let's understand the governance in a liberalized space ecosystem, right? So what are the existing issues in the governance of ISRO? So let's understand these aspects as well in detail, right? So in fact, in 2020, India has come up with space sector reforms. Now these space sector reforms have created Indian Space Authorization Center and New Space India Limited within ISRO. For example, if we specifically talk about the Indian Space Research and Development Organization, so it will involve in research and development, addition of the existing capability of the launch vehicles, so everything. So it mostly focuses on research and development and launch vehicles, or launching satellites into the space. However, two organizations which are established as part of the space sector reforms in the year 2021 is a New Space India Limited, and another is Indian Space Authorization, Space Promotion and Authorization Center. Now let's understand what are these Indian Space Promotion and Authorization Center and New Space India Limited. If we talk about this in space, it actually plays a very important role as a facilitator and even regulator. Its role is both facilitator as well as regulator role. And in fact, it also creates its creation. In space creation will give a boost to the private sector participation, because as of now, India is also focusing on encouraging the private sector participation as well. So therefore, this in space will give boost to the private sector participation in the entire range of space activities. And in fact, the in space also aims to handhold or support and promote guide the private industries in the space activities through encouraging policies and even a friendly regulator environment. However, what is the objective of this New Space India Limited? The objective of New Space India Limited, it is actually a public sector enterprise under the control of the government, and it is incorporated as a new commercial arm of Department of Space. Now the objective of New Space India Limited is to harness India's space power commercially and tap into the benefits of R&D carried out by the ISRO, and spearhead the commercialization of space products, including production of launch vehicles, transfer of technologies, and even marketing of space products. So these are all the objectives of New India Space Limited and Indian Space Promotion and Authorization Center. The problem is that we don't have a comprehensive national space law in India. If we don't have such a comprehensive national space law, it may create certain confusion or ambiguity. So therefore, there are issues of authorization from the government side, liability, insurance, dispute resolution. So all these are very important domains that needs adequate care. So since they are ambiguous, unclear, they have been creating a lot of confusion, so often pulling ISRO into the regulatory and commercial roles by default. Right. Now, in this context, a statutory space law would further protect and strengthen ISRO from ad hoc regulatory burdens, and it will empower Indian Space Promotion and Authorization Center with clear legal authority. The third most important advantage is clarify commercial liability for New Space India Limited and even private actors. It will ensure the policy continuity across the political cycles. So overall, we could say that if we have a comprehensive national space law, it will further strengthen, it will further enhance the efficiency of the ISRO. Right. So let's understand the competitiveness and industrial ecosystem challenges. For example, globally, all around the world, so the space activities are shifting towards frequent launches and partial reusability of the launch vehicles, and then rapid satellite manufacturing as well. So this is the trend across the world if you look at. However, ISRO has a vision of new generation launch vehicle, which is also known as NGLV. So this new generation launch vehicle is capable of lifting 30 tons of weight of satellites into the low Earth orbit. Now, in fact, this NGLV, a certain portion of NGLV can also be reusable in first stage elements. So therefore, the NGLV has rightly recognized the cost factor, the agility with which it could act, and the scale. So all these factors is defining the competitiveness. So therefore, as I've already told you, that this NGLV is going to be the game changer. However, achieving this, it actually requires deeper industrial capacity, advanced manufacturing, skilled human resources, and even long-term capital investment. Investment is necessary, skilled manpower is also necessary, large-scale private sector participation is also necessary, a comprehensive national space law is important, and a deeper industrial capacity, advanced manufacturing. So these are essential things which are actually required for ISRO to meet this competitiveness at the global level. So however, if you look at the investment in the space sector, it has been declining sharply from in 2024. So therefore, it has been reflecting global funding headwinds and long gestation periods in the space hardware. However, Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center's Technology Adoption Fund, so it has been established, and it seeks to bridge prototype to product gaps and reduce the import dependence as well. Right. So this is how, by doing these things, the competitiveness of the ISRO can be achieved, can be improved, and even the challenges can be safely, overcome. So the next important topic is on a draft bill to regulate pesticides. Now, why it is in news? It is in news because recently government seeks feedback on draft bill to regulate pesticides and promote safe and effective use of these pesticides. So let's understand about this bill, and let's also understand the difference between chemical pesticides and biopesticides, why it is important to regulate pesticides. Do we have any law before to regulate these pesticides? So let's understand this. Now, recently the Union Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, so it has prepared a draft bill, and it has also released this draft bill on the pesticides management. So this is pesticides management bill, and this bill is put for the public consultation. Now, earlier we have a Insecticides Act of 1968, and this draft pesticides management bill, once it is passed in the both houses of the parliament, and if it receives assent from the president, so it is going to repeal the earlier passed Insecticide Act of 1968. So therefore, if you look at the existing law, what are the problems with this existing law? And that's why the Union government has decided to repeal the Insecticide Act of 1968. right? So the existing law is considered as outdated. The law and its provisions are no longer suitable to the present needs because it has not been addressing the modern challenges. So what modern challenges? For example, new chemical formulations within these pesticides and the need for biopesticides so that the pesticides will not harm the environment and ecosystem, and digital monitoring of the pesticides production, sale, manufacturing, everything, and then the environmental concerns which are associated with the pesticides manufacturing or production or use. So therefore the objective of draft pesticides management bill is to address these concerns, and these concerns were not properly addressed by Insecticides Act of 1968. Now in this context, India is considered as one of the largest consumers of pesticides in the world. Now because India is one of the largest producers of food, so therefore in order to produce such a large quantities of food, so India is also one of the largest consumers of pesticides. Now in fact India is also using around 60,000 tons of pesticides every year. So this is actually a huge amount of pesticides. So when you use pesticides in such a large scale, it might lead to pesticide poisoning, environmental contamination, health issues for the farmers, unsafe residues, and it may also create health problems for the consumers who have been consuming these agricultural products. So therefore all these are the problems if we use a food which is excessively contaminated with the pesticides. So in this backdrop, we need a comprehensive regulatory framework. We need a comprehensive law that could actually address the concerns associated with these chemical fertilizers and promote biopesticides on a large scale. So that is a very, very important domain here, right? So however, what are the objectives of this draft bill? So if we're talking about this objectives of the draft bill, so this bill aims to ensure the availability of safe and effective and even quality pesticides as well. This is the first very important objective. Of course, the pesticides that the private sector is producing, it should be safe, it should be effective and quality. And the another objective is focusing on fertilizer actually have, because pesticides. So pesticides have a number of effects. For example, it affects the health of the farmers and the consumers. So therefore, it is important to make these pesticides have a minimal risk to both farmers and the consumers. And then it should have a minimal health risk. Pesticide bill is going to address these concerns effectively in a comprehensive way. And then there is a need to promote biopesticides on a large scale as well, because if we use biopesticides, now the costs can be substantially reduced, right? So particularly we need to talk about the input costs on the farmers can be substantially reduced with the biopesticides. So biopesticides are environment friendly. Why? Because they don't harm the environment and biodiversity. Biopesticides are also don't harm the health of humans, the consumers, farmers and even animals. So therefore through such bills it is important to promote biopesticides on a large scale. And fourth one is further strengthening the transparency and accountability aspects. So with these objectives, the draft pesticides bill has been put forward for public consultation by the Union Ministry of Union Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare. So let's understand what are the key provisions of this draft bill. Now if you look at the key provisions of this draft bill, now in fact this bill actually defined the pesticides. it has actually provided a definition of pesticides. So this definition includes substances of both chemical origin as well as biological origin. And these substances will cover plant growth, plant regulators, defoliants and dehiscents, and post-harvest chemicals which are being used to prevent deterioration during the storage and transportation. This is actually the definition which is provided by this draft pesticides bill. Right. Now, in this context, what institutional framework it is going to be established? Now, there is a need for an institutional framework to govern the pesticides safe usage, to ensure minimal risks, to ensure transparency and accountability in the usage of pesticides. So therefore, we need to have an institutional framework. Now, what institutional framework it has established? So it is going to establish a central pesticides board. Now, the central pesticides board will advise both center as well as the state government. So that is the objective of creating the central pesticides board. Now, it provides advice to both center and state government. On what matters it provides advice? On scientific matters and technical matters, including the good manufacturing practices of various pesticides, safe disposal of pesticides so that it will not harm the environment, and even recall procedures and advertising standards by these agencies. As part of the institutional framework, they are going to establish the registration committees as well. The objective of the registration committees is to grant, review, amend, cancel pesticide registrations based on safety and efficacy, and maintain a digital national register of pesticides as well. So with these objectives, there is an institutional framework it is going to be established. Now, what is the exact difference between the synthetic pesticides and biopesticides? Now, if you look at the difference between both, the synthetic pesticides, which they are not specific, so harm non-targeted species. However, if you look at the biopesticides, so biopesticides are highly specific, so they do not harm the non-targeted species. Now, synthetic pesticides, they cause a lot of pollution, but biopesticides, they do not cause pollution significantly. So to these synthetic pesticides, the existing insects may become resistant. For example, there is an helianthus, so it has become resistant to most insecticides. However, insects are not expected to develop resistance to these biopesticides, and this is also another advantage. Now, if you talk about the synthetic pesticides, there are several harmful residues and they may often remain in food, fodder and fibers. But biopesticides, no harmful residues, they remain in food, fodder and fibers as well. So therefore, this draft pesticides bill is going to promote the usage of biopesticides, and it is going to discourage the usage of synthetic pesticides as well. Now, let's understand the regulation and penalties which are going to be proposed in this draft pesticides bill. So this bill is going to regulate manufacture, import, sale, transportation, usage, storage and disposal of pesticides, and there will be a stringent penalty and punishment as well in case of violation. So in case of violation, an imprisonment of 5 years or a fine which is ranging from 10 lakh to 50 lakh will be given as well. Now, what is the significance of the bill, this draft seeds bill? If you talk about the overall significance of this particular bill, it encourages safe and judicious pesticide use. So therefore, it might reduce the health risks on farmers, consumers and animals. Now, in fact, India is also committed to sustainable development. So in order to achieve sustainable development within the agriculture sector, we must reduce the harmful nature of agriculture which may harm the environment, ecosystem and biodiversity. So therefore, sustainable agriculture can be achieved through such regulations on pesticides, because pesticides are also responsible for environmental harm. This draft pesticides bill is also aligned with best practices put forward by Food and Agriculture Organization and World Health Organization. Right, so it promotes biopesticides, supporting organic natural farming initiatives such as Bharatiya Prakriti Krishi Paddhati. Right, so therefore this is the significance of the pesticides bill that is going to be introduced in the parliament by the union government. The next important topic is Enforcement Directorate conducting searches in West Bengal, and large-scale protests which are taking place against these searches, particularly led by Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee. Now, in this context, we'll be understanding what exactly the Enforcement Directorate, what are its powers, what are its functions, so how the Director of Enforcement Directorate is appointed. So everything will be understanding here. So if you talk about the Enforcement Directorate, so this Enforcement Directorate is very often in use, and it comes under the Department of Revenue, Ministry of Finance, Government of India. So therefore, Enforcement Directorate is under the Ministry of Finance, under the Department of Revenue. However, this enforcement agency, Enforcement Directorate, is a specialized financial investigation agency. Now, what is the responsibility of this Enforcement Directorate? The responsibility of the Enforcement Directorate is enforcing both economic and financial laws. So, enforce economic and financial laws, prevent money laundering, foreign exchange violations, economic offenses, because these offenses may threaten country's financial stability. So, this is in a nutshell the objective of the Enforcement Directorate. Now, what is the mandate and key laws which are actually enforced by this? Now, in fact, Enforcement Directorate enforces the following major legislations. So one is Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002. Now, this legislation has been passed by the Parliament to prevent money laundering and confiscate proceeds of crime. Right, for example, if 5 crore are involved in a crime of money laundering, so the 5 crore will be confiscated, will be taken over by the Enforcement Directorate. Secondly, Foreign Exchange Management Act 1919. So it regulates the foreign exchange transactions. Fugitive Economic Offenders Act of 2018. So it is a legislation against economic offenders like Vijay Mallya, who flee India to evade the prosecution. So therefore, Enforcement Directorate enforces these 3 major laws. Now, under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act of 2002, Enforcement Directorate investigates the offences which are actually linked to scheduled crimes, such as it investigates corruption, fraud, narcotics, trafficking, even terrorism financing as well. Right? And in fact, Supreme Court has also looked into the Enforcement Directorate powers with respect to implementation of Prevention of Money Laundering Act as well. So you could look into it as well. Right, now in this context, what are the powers of the Enforcement Directorate? So Enforcement Directorate is going to have the following powers. So it can conduct search and seizure of premises and even documents, and it can also attach the properties which are involved in the crime, and it could arrest individuals who involved in money laundering, and it could also summon individuals, and it can record the statements of the individual as well. So between 2005 to 2023, ED provisionally attached assets worth of 1 lakh crore rupees. This is a huge amount, and that's how ED is playing a role. However, in recent times, there has been a criticism against ED that ED is being used as a political tool by the ruling government against the opposition parties. But now in this context, let's understand this appointment and tenure of the Director of Enforcement Directorate. So Director of Enforcement is appointed by the central government based on the recommendations of a high-level committee. So this committee is consisting of the Central Vigilance Commissioner, who is a chairperson, Union Home Secretary and Secretary personnel. So this is the 3-member committee, and based on the recommendations of this 3-member committee, the central government will appoint the director of the enforcement directorate. Right. So generally, the director of the enforcement directorate is typically selected from an IRS officer or an IPS officer. So they also have a fixed tenure of 2 years. A fixed tenure of 2 years. But extensions may be granted under specific conditions, and a provision that has been subject to judicial scrutiny by the Supreme Court as well, in case of extension of the tenure. Right. So if we talk about the role and contemporary debates which are surrounding around the enforcement directorate, is that ED is actually played a very important role in high profile cases involving bank frauds, corruption, corporate scams, and even political corruption. But the big question here is that the central government may be misusing enforcement directorate against the opposition parties and its leaders. So that's the question here, and it is very important to ensure the neutrality of enforcement directorate. Right. The next important topic is a withdrawal of US from the International Solar Alliance. So recently, US has decided to come out of the International Solar Alliance. Now, International Solar Alliance is an international organization. It was first established by both India and France under COP21, right? So COP21 held in Paris under the aegis of United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. During COP21, this International Solar Alliance International Solar Alliance. Now the membership of International Solar Alliance has already crossed 100 members. More than 100 members are in this International Solar Alliance. So what exactly is the objective of International Solar Alliance? The objective is to promote solar energy generation among all the member countries. To promote solar energy generation among all member countries is the objective of International Solar Alliance. So how they will promote the solar energy generation? Through collective funding, investing in research and development, and sharing best practices among countries, right? So through these initiatives, the country will invest, mobilize finances, fund R&D, fund new technologies, they share best practices, and that's how they promote solar energy generation. The advantage of solar energy generation is that it is a renewable energy, and in fact, the world, particularly those countries which are living in the tropics, so they actually receive a huge amount of sunlight, so they actually have a huge potential to generate a lot of solar energy as well. So therefore, there are several poor countries as well. For example, there are a lot of African countries which are located within these tropics. So even though they have a lot of potential to generate solar energy, they don't have technology, they don't have the funding, and they cannot invest in R&D. Therefore, through establishing the International Solar Alliance and other like-minded countries would encourage the poor underdeveloped countries to generate solar energy by providing funding and all. So therefore, we will reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, and fossil fuels, we all knew that they emit greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. It causes global warming, and global warming is further responsible for the climate change, right? So with this objective, it has been launched. Now this International Solar Alliance aims to promote solar energy deployment, particularly those countries which are located within the tropics, Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn. They actually receive abundant solar radiation, right? So as of now, in the International Solar Alliance, there are 125 member countries. So 125 member countries is not a small member. It is one of the largest global platforms which focuses exclusively on the solar energy generation and cooperation. So however, the core objective of this International Solar Alliance is to mobilize 1 trillion in investments in solar energy by the year 2030 to generate solar energy at the desired levels. Right? So therefore, it actually focuses on reducing technology costs, financing risks, and even policy barriers. Now coming to this topic, so in fact, recently an executive order has been signed on January 7 by United States, and it has announced that it is going to withdraw from the International Solar Alliance. So earlier it was part of the ISA, but now US has decided to withdraw out of the International Solar Alliance along with 65 other international organizations. Right? So ISA is one such organization among these organizations. So along with these organizations, US is also going to withdraw from the ISA. However, this decision has been taken by the US according to them that they would like to save the taxpayer funding on organizations which they consider wasteful organizations, ineffective organizations, or harmful organizations. Right? So therefore, this is not a like-minded decision from the US. It actually involves their own national interest. After taking into account their own national interest, their own priorities, they decided to come out of these organizations. However, US withdrawal from the organizations like ISA will not significantly affect the functioning and its efficiency, because there are several other like-minded countries who are actually ready to cooperate and collaborate with other countries in terms of technology, finance, research and development, sharing best practices and all. So that's all for today, and thank you so much. January 2025, and